Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
We forgot the countdown.
Oh,
No, this was all on purpose.
let's start over again. Let's do it again. Hey, everybody. Welcome to my first collaborative live stream. I'm Jonathan Hall. Today I'll be doing some pair programming and some TDD on my open source project. If you've watched these before, you'll notice the visual is a little bit different than last time or the last 15 times, whatever. I'm trying out some different streaming software that made it easier to invite guests. So I don't really know how the software works. Thanks, Adrian. He's helping me out. He knows the software better than I do. So hopefully it won't be a disaster. And if it is, well, we learned something. Welcome, Adrian. Welcome, Dennis. Well, why don't you do a quick intro of yourselves, since I know a lot of the people watching are already follow you. Some don't. Let's do your intros. Then I'll do my intro, and I'll talk about the project that we're going to do today.
Good. So I'm Adrian. Most of you probably already know me from the streams we do and the content we do, Smack Up CTO and all this kind of stuff. Talking about a lot about culture in tech, about continuous delivery. Front-end PWA is a big topic at the moment. So it's a little bit, let's say, nuanced, what I'm talking about. And the reason is that I'm talking with a perspective of being a small to medium-sized business CTO, not so much of, let's say, pure engineer or developer. So I'm in entire vertical, strategical, tactical, and operational. And this is where I'm always happy to talk about. And this is the reason I'm here today as well, because TDD is a big topic and I'm pretty convinced of that. So I just want to help today those great both guys, showing you why TDD is great and how you can apply that. And I will help today to connect you to those both. So if you have something to connect, to comment, just put it in the comments. I will put it on screen and take care of that. Thank you, Raj. Thank you very much. And now let's go to Dennis.
Hey, I'm Dennis. You probably know us from the Architect Journey streams. I invited quite a few of you over and made an announcement. I'm a life coach and a technical coach. So I usually work with startups and helping teams improve their software delivery process. I usually work directly with the team and their leader. So I have a lot of exposure, let's say, to coaching TDD or coaching continuous delivery, and really surveying the situation to really figure out, okay, can we go faster? Is this the fastest that we can go at? And what does fast even mean? And what is it that we want to optimize? Does work suck? How do we make work suck less? Is this a team? Do we feel like we're a team? Dealing all with those sort of soft issues, human issues of resistance, or just having like a really, really weird engineering culture. I come in and sort of try to make not a full transformation, but at least a holistic improvement, I like to say. And Jonathan and I met we shared a mentor, Jonathan Stark.
Yeah.
That's where I took some inspiration from Tiny DevOps back then. And that's how we got to know each other, and then we connected on a few different Slacks, and we started streaming at about the same time.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for the intros. And so, since many of you are coming from Dennis and Adrian's stream, I'll do the proper intro myself too, so that everybody knows who everybody is. I'm Jonathan Hall. Lately, I've been calling myself a fractional gopher. I do Go development, and I'm available for hire on a fractional basis. So if you or your team need some expertise with Go, I'm your guy. Reach out, let me know. I also have two other projects related to Go that I'm doing right now. One is Boldly Go, which is my YouTube channel and my live stream brand. You can find me at youtube.com/@boldlygo if you're interested in the Go language. Today's stream we'll be using Go, but it's really more about pair programming and TDD. So you don't have to be a Go person to appreciate today's stream. But if you are, or you're interested in Go, check out Boldly Go on YouTube. I also write a daily email list. Actually, I write two daily email lists. I write one about Go. If you go to boldlygo.tech, you can subscribe there. Or if you're more interested in language agnostic software delivery topics, similar to what Dennis does, you can go to jhall.io. /daily, and you can read my daily topics there. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you probably already see a lot of that software delivery topics. I post a lot about that on LinkedIn as well. So that I think is a reasonable introduction of myself. Let's talk about the project. So I've been doing this project actually for several years, but I've been doing it on the live stream for the last several weeks, and I'm adding a feature to a project. But I'm going to go kind of back to basics, explain what the project is, so everybody has an idea what we're doing today. So let me share my screen.
Hey, Grant. Hey, Jens. Have a few of our
StreamYard, Jens. I already posted it in LinkedIn, but it's called StreamYard.
Cool. So the project I'm working on is called Kivik, Kivik. It is a Go SDK or client library for the CouchDB database, which is a JSON-based document store, NoSQL database. What I was building a project back in 2017 that I wanted to use CouchDB. I found a library to do it. It was kind of unmaintained. It didn't have some features I wanted. It didn't even have an open source license technically. Like I had no license at all, which means it's technically not open source. And then I wanted to add some features. I wanted to make the backend pluggable, which is really key to what we're doing today. What that means is kind of like if you use Go or really any language, you probably have a common like RDBMS layer, and you can plug in MySQL or Postgres or whatever. Maybe it's your ORM or maybe something like that, right? But you can plug in MySQL or Postgres or SQLite or Microsoft SQL or Oracle or whatever. So I use a similar pattern with this library. So I have the sort of front end of the library that I call Kivik, and then you can plug in different backends. Now, most people just use the CouchDB backend because that's what they want. That makes sense. But I have a couple of other backends that are in various degrees of development. And the one I'm working on now, the feature I'm adding is for SQLite. So I could plug SQLite into the back of my CouchDB API. Why would you do that? Because SQLite and CouchDB are completely different databases. That's true. This isn't going to like allow you to synchronize SQLite to CouchDB or whatever. It allows you to store CouchDB style documents in SQLite. And the reason I want this, the main reason, is to facilitate testing. So I can very easily in my unit tests or whatever, testing my bigger app, I don't need to start CouchDB in a Docker container. I can just run against SQLite. SQLite also has the beautiful ability to run in memory. I was writing a memory only store, and then I had it dawned on me after spending a year on that, I could just use SQLite and I'd kill two birds with one stone because I could just run SQLite against an in-memory database. So that's the feature I'm adding. I'm adding a SQLite based backend to Kivik to do that sort of cool stuff.
So Kivik is what to a user? Just to give us some context, architecturally speaking. When you say backend, like we are back.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean.
Back to what? Like
so if you have, so Kivik. I'm trying to think how to describe this. Like in Go terminology,
Kivik is a facade of some kind.
Yes, it's a facade. It's like the standard library's database SQL package, whereas the backends I'm working on, SQLite in this case, is similar to the Postgres driver or the MySQL driver that plugs into that. I want to say, what's the Java?
So Kivik,
maybe you can think of it this way: that Kivik is kind of like the ORM layer.
Yeah.
So in Doctrine language, this would be the ODM, an abstraction over a document manager.
It's an abstraction and an adapter somehow
because it's a NoSQL database. It's a NoSQL database adapter, right? It doesn't have a relational element to it. They are documents. Even when you're storing the documents in a relational database, you're still storing them relation agnostic.
Correct.
So is that some kind you plan, for example, to make it connectable to MongoDB, for example?
No, I don't really plan to do that. Mongo and Couch are very similar in a lot of ways, but they're just different enough to not make for useful mapping.
You can't use Mongo without implementing Mongo. like actually being exposing
Yeah.
Mongo's internals.
Yeah, I mean, I did look at, so there's actually there's CouchDB and there's also Couchbase, which I understand were the same product like many years ago, and Couchbase sort of
Yes,
forked and
yes.
went commercial.
Mhm.
And even that has changed enough that it's not really reasonable to
Mhm.
make Kivik work with Couchbase. And Mongo is different even more than
Mhm.
Couchbase, so it's just not, they're just not similar enough to really be meaningful in that way.
We already have some feedback from Mateusz Robel. Shall we go through it? A
Absolutely.
question to you both. So I would go through it. Mateusz states first, "Hi, I have a very interesting topic for TDD on Real Project. Currently, I'm having some fun with Angular 17.2 and Signal Store. I spend a lot of hours playing with setting up some simple tests for Signal Store, just whole module. It does not work in some cases because it's cutting edge and there is no documentation how to do it properly. So summarizing, you may want to do sometimes you may want, but sometimes you can't TDD. But do you consider component first storybook development as TDD?" So in essence, it's about storybook and TDD.
So, I mean, we have an episode about this on Thursday. I don't want to spoil too much.
Can that be the answer? Tune in on Thursday? Because honestly, I don't know. I'm not a front end developer. I don't really have any
Well,
great sense of what's going on here.
I would wait. Mateusz has a follow up. Adrian,
Mhm.
could you? Is that really related? I don't think it is.
No,
it,
not
it doesn't.
really.
No. So let's keep it on screen. The TDD doesn't work. I'm trying not to be that guy on LinkedIn. You know, like I'm trying not to. Like, I'm so trained with like LinkedIn speech that I'm Mateusz. I'm sorry. TDD first and foremost is to help you build qualities into your implementation and your testing that might be considered valuable and reasonable and practical for a business. Which means that if you are an Angular developer, then playing around with signals in Angular and test covering signals in Angular might have value. But if you're not an Angular dev, not on the internal team, and you're just playing around with it, it's very difficult to do TDD in that context because you have no user, right? So in absence of a user, in absence of something that the user wants to do, TDD by itself is a very bad means for its own end. So it's really hard to sort of abstract this idea of I'm exploring with TDD. You might actually, TDD, what you might be doing is actually you're writing code to observe yourself come up with a more reasonable testing plan. But that is sort of frustration oriented. Like you're trying to make your exploration less frustrating. That doesn't mean that you're actually pursuing product level quality improvements because you don't have a product. You know, your product is basically in its primordial state in the sense that you first need to have confidence with the framework that you're using to even be able to express what's going on. You know, if you're TDDing with the product in mind, I would assume there would be like zero or as little as possible Angular specific code in there, which I think is similar to what we're doing with Jonathan today. Is that there are pieces of software probably in there in the architecture that should be framework agnostic. So it's very hard to play with the framework while you're writing framework agnostic code.
Okay.
That's usually what people run into. Yeah.
And Mateusz already also said that SQLite is great for unit testing, actually.
Yeah,
for
it
the
is.
same reasons.
It is.
So on that topic, I've pulled up the file that defines the schema that I create in SQLite. So to give a sense of how CouchDB maps to SQL. So you can't just create arbitrary tables in SQLite and expect it to be exposed as CouchDB, right? Because it's a very different schema. So what happens is if you create a CouchDB database using my driver, and it creates these tables for you. It creates one. The table names are replaced because are placeholders here. because it depends on what the user provides. But this is for a list of revisions. So this is sort of the tree structure of nodes. Then you have the main database table. So this is what actually contains the document that you're creating, and then one for attachments, and then a couple other peripheral things that we may or may not get into depending on what we do today. So there's three key tables. There's the revisions table, which tracks different revisions of each document, kind of like revisions in Git. And then you have the table that contains the actual data, or sort of like the files in Git, and then attachments, which we may or may not get into, but you can attach arbitrary files to a document as well in CouchDB.
Like an image.
An image, yeah. Text files, CSV files, whatever, anything you want.
What you wouldn't. So if these were emails, I can think about these as a threaded email response, and each response can have an attachment.
Yeah, kind of like that. Sure.
It is equivalent, right? Like the structure I just
roughly speaking, yes. Yeah.
Roughly equivalent. Okay.
Yeah. So, now, as far as what we're going to do today, I haven't decided what we're going to do. That's up for us to decide. It's up for us.
Okay.
As a
I have my Go is not my primary language,
right?
And the closest Go language, I have used Go before, but the closest C language I've used was PHP. Just for
okay.
but as Jonathan explained to me, he's actually doing JavaScript anyway. So
okay, you say that in jest, Adrian, but let me share something on that page I just closed. So I said one of the goals for writing this project in the first place was to have pluggable backends. There were two backends in particular I wanted to use: CouchDB and PouchDB. PouchDB, you probably don't know what it is.
Is that like an in-memory something?
It's a JavaScript in-browser version of CouchDB.
JavaScript in-browser version.
Yeah. So
how is it
based on IndexedDB?
It depends on what browser you're using, but you can use IndexedDB, yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
So it allows you to synchronize between your browser and CouchDB.
Huh.
But it's written in JavaScript. So why would I write a Go library to talk to a JavaScript library? Because you can compile Kivik into JavaScript if you want to.
How?
Using Gopher.js.
And that is what?
Which is also why, we haven't talked about this today, but I talked about it on previous live streams. This is also why I still support an ancient version of Go.
I see. Because
so I've set
adapting yourself to the requirements of Gopher.js.
Exactly. So I have set the required version, minimum version, Go 1.17. Go 1.22 just came out a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm 5 major versions behind. Gopher.js is getting close to having 1.18 support, but they added generics then, which made it was a big language change, and it's been taking a while for us to get that. I'm actually one of the co-maintainers of Gopher.js, so I've been watching this process very closely. We actually just yesterday released Gopher.js 1.19 beta without generics support. We have support for Go 1.18 and 1.19 without generics.
Yeah, I imagine that would be very hard to port to JavaScript in a way that would be meaningful.
The generics?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a difficult problem to solve in the first place, regardless of JavaScript. But that's not really what we're here to talk about today. I just mentioned this as an aside. So that this library that we're going to play with today is designed to work in JavaScript. So yeah, Adrian thought he was making a joke, but he was actually telling something very profound.
That's such an interesting project.
It was no joke. You just said it today in the comment.
I know.
Okay.
All right.
And what,
so,
can I would like, if I can, I would open up your GitHub repo in my browser if possible.
Yeah, of course.
What URL should I go to?
If you go to kivik.io,
Okay.
There's a GitHub
button
top right.
Yeah, top right. Yeah, thank you. I would just like to look at the commit history and sort of follow what's been going on, to have it in my front of mind. I do a lot of Git repo forensics, right? So I do a lot of looking for patterns in how developers deploy, how developers branch, how certain ecosystems evolve, modules.
Sure.
So I I'm quite a Git history nerd, so I like to have this front of mind.
So,
What should we do today?
Yeah, so I have this file open on my screen that has a bunch of stubs in it, unimplemented
Okay.
functions. So one thing we could do is we could pick one of these and implement it. That would be a
Okay.
fairly straightforward thing to do. Another option is I do have some functions that are partly implemented but not completely, and I have a sort of a to-do list in my test file. We could pick up one of those, but it might be easier to follow along if we just start with something new. I don't know. What do you think?
Like what will be an exciting finish? An exciting finish for you today? Like, what's the hardest problem that you would want to maximize us to have the most time for?
The hardest problem.
Yeah, the most valuable to solve problem. It doesn't need to be the most complex.
But it should be doable in time.
There you go. So the hardest problem is going to
Yeah.
be that to run a view in CouchDB, you need to have JavaScript running. So I need to run JavaScript in Go. Now this is quite doable. I've just never done it before, and I don't think it's a 2-hour project. So that's probably the hardest problem to solve, but probably not one for today.
To have a what? To have a view?
To have a view, let me pull out the documentation.
So you would need JavaScript, a JavaScript lexer of some kind, because the view will be defined.
A runtime, a complete runtime.
Because there's MapReduce, I'm assuming, inside the view, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So you create a view. Let's see if I can find a good example of that.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't really matter to demonstrate, but yeah, you can pass it some JavaScript. It needs to match a certain function signature, take certain input, return certain output, and then you can create custom MapReduce functions. So that's something I want to do. I haven't done it for any of my backends yet, but I don't think it's an hour and a half project, which is about what we have left.
Fair.
I mean, something we could probably do in an hour and a half is implement get attachment or delete attachment.
Sure, let's do that. Let's build some confidence.
Super exciting, but I think it'll give us a good introduction to what the project does.
It's about TDD, right?
Yeah.
We have some comments going on. Is that Modest?
Not yet. It is just they're
having a conversation.
Exactly, but here is Yanis and Modeste does basically have conversation about
that's awesome.
Matthieu said. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So if you want to follow that, please follow the please follow the LinkedIn chat, because I will only show what is basically directed towards
front of editor,
the both speakers in this case. Yes.
Okay. We have a good audience, but like 50, 60 people.
60
Are you streaming on
right
YouTube?
Now.
Are you streaming on YouTube as well?
65 people, right?
I am.
In total, yeah.
Ooh,
I don't know how many are there. I haven't checked.
It's pretty cool.
Looks like we have 3 people watching on YouTube, and the rest are on LinkedIn.
So
I'm gonna move this file this function to a new file.
Okay.
Just to make it really clear and
those
easy
are your stubs, right? Yeah. That was your to-do list. From where you copied it.
Right. That's essentially my to-do list.
It's an interface. Yeah.
So now I'll close that, and then I'm just going to write the boilerplate for the test. Since I know you're not a Go developer, I'll do that part, and then we'll work together on the rest.
Sure.
Now I have a helper library I've written that I'm using that I'm going to use for this too. I'm just going to create an empty struct right now, and we'll fill it in as we go.
Is that for keeping track of the messages and errors?
Right. So I'm using a pattern called table-driven test, which is very common in Go. You can do it in any language. Okay. So I basically create an array of test cases, and then that can all run through the same test function, essentially. So, and this struct is one of those test cases. So that's where I define my inputs and my expected outputs and so on.
Okay. It's like a snapshot test. Input, output, and you compare them.
Could be. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So and then here is where the test logic will go.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's an
here,
interesting setup. Haven't seen this used before.
And this parallel
So-
means that the test runs in parallel, so they are not
Right.
serialized. Okay.
right.
It will run Go routines, right? As much as it can.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Okay.
So usually I mean, I don't know. We're supposed to be pairing here. I don't want her to be while the driving. What test do you think we should start with, Dennis?
Forget attachment.
Forget.
How would I describe get attachment? Like,
So
if
get
I
attachment will you provide. You can't. I should put.
what guarantees does get attachment have? Like, I would assume that putting an attachment in and then getting it would be a silly test. So I would much rather
Well,
test
it
detail.
it might be, except
but it
that
might be
we
end
haven't
to end.
implemented any of that yet.
Exactly. So it might be a
I mean,
silly test to start with.
I've implemented put attachment, or I've implemented part of put attachment.
Yeah.
Um,
But we
so
want it to be independent. So we should
do.
be able to put something into the database, even if put isn't implemented.
We should be able to, yes, and we can. There's two ways to create attachments. One of the ways is complete. The other one is not. So we do have a way to do that. We can also do it directly through SQLite if we want to. We can just put the right stuff into the database table. So
just
the
let's start
basic
with
concept
that.
with get attachment is you pass it a document ID and a file name, and you should get
file
back
name.
the content type, some certain metadata about the file.
Okay. And this is specific to SQLite, or is it specific to the contract that we're following?
This contract is defined by ultimately by CouchDB, although this particular implementation of it is Kivik. So we just need to implement this function signature.
Okay.
So maybe we start with a false case. So you get a random ID and you expect a proper error
2
message.
minutes. I need to jump to the bathroom real quick. Just give me a moment. Sorry to jump in on the first step.
That's all right. But Adrian, I think you're on the right track. So how did you describe that?
The false test, actually.
There's at least two ways we could have like a false test. One is that the document doesn't exist, and the other is the document exists, but that file name doesn't exist on the document. So
we have two of them, actually.
Yeah. Technically, you could also have a database that doesn't exist, but that's more advanced. We'll probably won't do that today. Which one do you want to start with?
I would say because doc_id is standing first, so we need to make sure that actually it doesn't really matter. So let's test if the document doesn't exist, right?
Okay.
If we enforce it. And then we need to have a test where the document ID actually exists, but the file name doesn't.
I'll make a to-do list here for that. Whoops. Doc exists, but file name does not. Good.
And the question would be, do we expect something very specific if those both pass? What would we expect of a file or an attachment to have? Do we make schema checks, or what is the exact thing here? So since it is not a structured database, it's probably based on just key value stuff. So probably we need to check if the file meets specific criteria, or it's maybe outdated, maybe something like that. I don't know how we test versioning in this case.
Yeah. Okay. So I can add, since I have a lot of familiarity with how this works, I can add some failure cases that we might consider. Doc exists and file exists, but doc is deleted. So when you delete something, it doesn't purge it; it just like leaves a tombstone. So that could be a failure case. You could also have conflicts. You could have two documents of the same version that conflict with each other. You need to return the correct version. Fingers in my place. you can, and then so those are the failure cases I can think of. There may be others that we'll think of in the future. As far as success cases, there's just the natural, return existing file from existing doc.
Mm-hmm.
You can also request a historical revision. So you could be on revision 10, or you could request the attachment from revision 4. So that could happen. Okay, there's a failure case, actually. You could request a revision that doesn't exist.
So, Grant, you are stating or asking password. What do you mean by that? It's just a question to the audience.
All right. I'm going to start to fill in some of the properties of this test. I think, I mean, I'm happy to do this with pairing, but I think it'll be a lot more tedious since nobody else has the same context I do. But if you have questions, just jump in and ask. So
Yeah.
I'm going to put in the inputs here: doc ID, file name, and then the convention I usually use is for the things that I want returned, but I use a want prefix. So I'm going to say want attachment, and a want error, and the errors have an HTTP status attached to them. So I'm going to search for, or I'm going to put that in here too. So for this first test case, where the document doesn't exist, we can just make up some ridiculous ID.
I'm back.
Hey, Dennis is back.
I have a stupid question in between. Is Go like when you retrieve it and the structure of the is basically not fitting the type? Would it cause an error or not? So would it just accept it?
You mean like the content type or the data type of a variable?
The data type. So maybe we have a different version and file was stored differently a year ago, and today we have additional or renamed parameters or properties. Would that be an error in Go, or wouldn't it be an error? Just for the sake of types.
Well, so reading SQLite is kind of loosely typed in the first place. It kind of stores everything as essentially I don't know how it stores it, but it over the wire it treats it as a string. So whether it's an integer or a Boolean, you kind of get a string back.
The interfaces are doc typed as well, right? So you are narrowing what would be considered in Java a generic POJO, and then you're basically guard typing it down to a more specific type, right? So that's also how the JSON marshallers work, right? Like you start with a generic super type, and then by virtue of guarding it against doing guard checks, you narrow it down to a outside interface. Are we doing that? Is that part of the?
I think it was just a general question. So in principle, you could have a situation where the schema changed from a year ago, and now you have a type conflict. It's the responsibility of the developer to, handle that gracefully if possible.
So what's in front of us here? So did you run the tests yet?
No, we haven't run a test yet. I'm still writing a first failing failure test case. So we did a little to-do list of some of the test cases we want to do. The first one we're going to do is the document doesn't exist. Then we want to do the document does exist, but the file requested doesn't exist. A few others that we won't read through them again right now.
Okay.
So I'm just writing the first failure case. I want a status of 404. Actually, I'm going to use the standard library constant for that, just to be more clear. And then an error, something like that. I don't know if that's the literal error message I'll use, but maybe I'll change it later. But that's fair to start with, right?
Yeah.
So now we should be able to run the tests and expect them to fail. Why does it think they passed? Oh, I know why. Because this doesn't actually do anything yet. That's why. So let's write our logic here. So we need.
This is the test runner, right?
Yeah. Let me copy some
boilerplate. Some boilerplate, please.
I'm going to copy some boilerplate from a previous test.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to take on a lot of discomfort here and just sort of wing it as you go,
Mhm.
because I have there are architectural things about your setup as well that I don't understand. So I'll just defer those the stupid questions, if I may, and we take it from there. So will we actually have an SQLite-backed database here?
Yes, it creates it in so this boilerplate I just copied, this new DB method or function creates a new in-memory SQLite database.
Fair.
So every test gets its own
And that's
distinct.
not Kivik. That's SQLite.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I don't want us to use our library code in the setup that we're testing,
Right.
because
Right.
it's you have the circular dependency. Okay, makes sense. But the test will still be fast and in process, right? So we want to integrate against the backing engine of, we will write an SQL query, and I believe the detail that we want to abstract away will be the structure of those queries, right?
Right. Okay, so let me just go through quickly the boilerplate I just copied and modified, so we're not confused. So I'm going to comment this out because we haven't done that yet.
Yeah,
we haven't done that yet. We don't need that for this first test, so
Yeah.
comment that out for now. So first thing I do is I create a test instance of the database. It creates an SQLite instance in memory.
Okay.
It runs a couple of our sort of housekeeping things. It creates a database, which is what in the background creates those schemas we just talked about, creates those tables with proper names.
Yeah.
The database is called test, and it returns it, and it registers a cleanup function. So when the test is done, it cleans up that SQLite instance. So that's really all that function does.
Awesome.
Then we call, that's silly. Mock context isn't a thing. Thanks, Copilot, for making up nonsense. Hallucinating, as they say.
We had that today as well. For 50 minutes, we were looking for a wrong thing for missing types, and it was just a backslash in the import created by Copilot instead of a dash. As somehow it wasn't an error, but I don't know. It was awful.
So here's where it actually calls the function that we're trying to test, right? That's this function here that right now does nothing except return 2 nils. But that's the function we want to test.
Does it compile?
Yeah, it should compile.
Can we run it?
The tests are failing right now, but it does seem to be compiling.
I mean, if we can isolate it to these 2 tests, I would like to see sort of what it looks like. I'm using go test? Yes. Okay. Fail.
Yeah.
Unexpected
it is,
error.
It is compiling. It is running, and we get a failure.
Is that what we expected?
Yes. So it's complaining that we got an unexpected error. We got no error, but we expected an error called not found missing. And we got a status of 0. We expected a status of 404. So yes, that's as expected.
Okay.
Which takes us to the end of this here. Here it tests. This function tests whether the error string matches the expected string. This clause checks whether the status matches the status from the error. And then if there is no error, then we do the final check, which doesn't matter for this test. We actually check the success response against what's expected.
I see. So this boilerplate is attachment specific because you've implemented attachments in some other library already.
So there are other methods, yes, that use attachments. Right.
Okay. Fair. Yeah.
Right.
So I would ask you to naively make this test pass.
And how would you suggest you do that?
I mean, if this is a 404 scenario, I would just, without any if checks, right? So I just want us to have cyclomatic complexity of 1.
Yep.
And to just go straight to the error case. Create a new error, whatever helper you're using to do that. And to make sure the error code is correct, the message is correct. And then we would write a second test to make the path diverge with some kind of if statement.
Right. So now the tests are passing, we can see here, but I'll run them manually to see the same.
Because the question is, are they passing?
Yes, they are passing now.
Yes. So what would be the only valid reason for this test to fail? When should it fail?
The current not found test.
Yeah.
It should not fail if we have a successful document retrieval.
Okay. So it's not failing. It's not passing for the right reason right now, and it wasn't failing for the wrong reason. For the right reason.
I think that's right. I follow your logic. Yes.
Okay. So I would like us to flip around the test.
Explain.
Well, a good test should only fail for one reason. That the
Yes.
code doesn't work for the behavior that we tested.
Mm-hmm.
Our code failed because we had zero code in the body. So it failed because of structural issues.
Mm-hmm.
So if I
Right.
return this, right now we're not connected to a database. Or at least here we're not trying to connect to a database.
Right.
We're not using the driver.
Exactly.
So what I would do is I would keep this implementation and revert to a default error that would make the tests fail still. Right, so I would only return not found missing if we had actually checked if it
Got it.
exists. Right,
So
so
let's change this to
I would just refactor it because it passes. So in the green state, I would say let's at least have an if statement here to simulate having done the check of, hey, does it exist? If not, return this. And if it doesn't exist, let's see let's see what the other case is for this failing. Right, because we return nil and an error. Now I'm assuming nil is something we don't care about, and we only check for the error case, right? Because we didn't say we want to return nil. Yeah, I think I would.
That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
I will be much more comfortable with this. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Because there should be some intention of we've made some effort in checking that.
So
we
now this true is a placeholder for actual logic.
Correct.
As opposed to
Correct.
just it being implicit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise it's a very naive test.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So now we know that if we get that if statement wrong, that second half of the
Yeah, this
will
error should
come
never
into-
happen. No,
but this
further.
error will happen. This error will happen once we give it a document ID, right? Because the test is actually
once we
the
give it
test is actually not testing a unit. It's actually testing it's more broad. It's end-to-end testing, right? Because we didn't say
Right.
document does not exist. What kind of test is that, right? Like document does not exist. Because I can give you a document ID that has foo txt, and I can have foo, and there it will exist.
Mhm.
Right, so then the test should not fail.
Right.
The test should be failing if the setup was correct, but it's not.
Right. Okay. So how do you want to proceed next?
New test. I would commit here if you're committing. Is there a nice way to say not implemented in Go, like throw not implemented exception?
So I was going to say we could just panic right here.
Yeah, I would rather panic. Yeah, I'd rather panic on the bottom half. Because I would like to have a, yeah. I know it seems weird, but the test should not be. I would rather the test panics than fails for the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, the first test, with the first test, it's always weird. Let's just get to the second test.
All right.
We have a comment from Yanis. All tests must be deterministic.
I wouldn't say all tests. I would say
that's tricky.
The determinism is a quality that you can trade off as you're going, right? So,
I mean, how do you test a random number generator?
Well, a random number generator is not random. Right? A number generator is pseudo-random.
Well, it can be. I mean, it depends on which random number generator you're testing. The point is, we need to be able to test non-deterministic things too.
Yeah.
And so I mean,
test those with probabilities, but you don't want them to be flaky. Ideally, you would want to control the probability engine.
Right. So the point is, the point isn't.
The point is that we didn't control.
Deterministic? Well,
the determinism is determined in this case by us having a SQLite database and putting a document in,
mhm,
and I want this test to fail if the query was incorrect,
right.
not if the setup was incorrect.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I'm alluding to here, right? So this test should not fail if we can't connect to the database. If we can't connect to the database, it should panic, but it shouldn't fail.
What is exactly panic? Since I never heard that before.
It's
It's like a high-level throw exception.
it's similar to an exception, except that it's meant to truly be exceptional.
Yeah.
It's
You're not
not
meant to
just
recover.
normal error handling. It's for truly exceptional things.
Yeah, you're not meant to recover from a panic.
It's more exceptional than exceptions.
Yeah, an exception
Good.
you can
Now
catch.
I understand.
An exception you can catch,
Okay.
and then it will go away.
You can catch a panic. You can recover from panic too, but
Like
and
you're
I'm actually
signaling
working
that
on
you're
it.
not.
Yeah, you're not supposed to. I'm working on
You're
an
not supposed to,
application
yeah.
where it was clearly written by probably Java developers who thought
Mm-hmm.
that panic was the normal way to do error handling. So there's just panics everywhere, and it's very difficult to follow that code and to debug it. I'm doing a months-long effort to remove the panic.
Well,
Okay.
I would actually follow through on the to do next. I would now change this test because this test is useless to us, right? Because we see from the implementation that it does not get us closer.
Right.
So the part of the to do
But
makes
it does set a ground. It does set some groundwork so that when we add other tests, we
yeah, like
expect this not
right
to regress.
now, right
it
now,
stands, you're right.
right now what we tested was the test runner. So
Mhm.
this is a test that we wrote to make progress, but not to actually keep in the end. Right. So
Well, I think we will keep this test. It will just as we add once we add, say, this case,
mhm.
then this existing test will suddenly make sense because it will test that we do the right thing in the not found scenario. So I think this might be a good test to add next.
Mm-hmm.
Return existing file from existing doc. Yeah. Now, actually, let's return. I would continue from our example. So the document does not exist.
Mhm.
So let's continue. The document does exist, but the file name does not. Is the error different?
Okay. Probably not. I mean, we can decide.
Because if the error is not different, then I would merge the tests together, but then at least the implementation should make progress.
So if we want to consider the reference implementation, we could see how CouchDB handles this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it gives a 404 in both cases. What I don't know is if it gives a different error string.
Okay, let's
So
do
let's
that.
see what the documentation says.
Because we have a contract here, right? So we're not really doing TDD in the sense that we're writing new functionality. We're following a very strict contract. We're testing the implementation of whether we're following the contract.
So this just says it returns 404. So the contract is 404. Specified database document or attachment was not found. So the actual error string it returns may vary, but that's not part of the contract. So we have leeway there. So we can decide if we want to just say not found missing, or if we want to say file not found, or whatever more specific thing.
And this is the same then with SQLite?
SQLite, if you try to... No, this has nothing to do with SQLite.
Okay.
Okay. Since we're testing against it, right?
Well, we're testing an implementation that uses SQLite.
Okay.
So we're not going to gain
But
anything
like
from this test.
The error message, when you do a select and you get nothing back, you don't get an error. You just get no rows.
Okay.
Now, the Go driver, in some cases, turns that into an error that is completely unrelated. So we would need to interpret that error and convert it to the right one. If we get
Okay, let's jump to the most practical example. The document exists and the file name exists, and it's not deleted.
So a success case, yeah.
Yeah. Let's jump to that, because the error cases are not interesting if the errors are all the same, because then we don't actually not motivated to write any new code. And I think we can delete this document does exist, but file name does not, until we have a reason to add it. I would ask you to remove it so that it doesn't.
Okay. So now we
distract
want
us.
an actual success object.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull that up here in the left-hand side so we can see
Mm-hmm.
what kind of details we want there. Let's say the file name. We can make up these details.
Yeah, let's just make sure that the content type and the file name are correct.
Okay. I think we'll get. We're also going to get a rev pause. This is some metadata that you probably don't care about, but I'm going to put it in here.
And size should be larger than 0.
The length should be something. Oh, size, not length.
Size.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So now this test is going to fail.
Why?
Test failed. Well, there's at least 2 reasons it fails. One is that our logic doesn't do anything, and the other is we don't have setup yet, so that document doesn't actually exist.
Okay, but
So I think,
but then let's write the test so that it counteracts the first failure that we receive. Right. So when the document exists and the file exists, it should return status
right.
X.
So I think the next step is to add the setup to make that document and file exist. Do you agree?
Yeah, but I would, we don't have a name for the test. You named it success.
Yeah.
But I would like it to say exactly.
Tell me.
When the document exists and the file exists, the status is then the correct status. When the file and document exists, we return a valid. When we return the status of, no, actually I don't care about the valid attachment. I just want to check that the status is correct. Is it 200? Is this an HTTP like protocol?
It is. The way that manifests itself is that you just get no error.
You get no error. Okay.
And you get you get no error and you get a valid attachment.
Okay, but I don't want us to test the attachment. Can we remove the attachment and so there's no error? Can we express that, or is it just implicit here?
Yeah. So right now, since I copied the boilerplate, it's going to check for that. But let me change this. If error does not equal nil, or tt.want attachment equals nil.
Okay.
So now it'll early return before it. All right. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to delete this this test. We'll add it again later if we care.
We'll add it again later. Yeah. Awesome.
And I can get rid of that return.
Oh, I can join the chat. Oh, didn't know that. Cool.
All right.
Yeah, Yannis said a good point. All tests must be deterministic, but I want us to also be clear that it's more important that the test fails for the right reason rather than it being deterministic. Right now, it's deterministic because we don't have any randomness outside of like network issues or disk space.
Yeah.
Or memory, out of memory issues.
Or.
Yeah. So, but they are in process.
Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. So I would now like this to pass for the right reason. So I would actually like us to do setup.
Okay. I'm going to add that setup function here then that the boilerplate allows for, but we aren't doing yet.
Okay.
So I'll just uncomment this.
Cool.
It doesn't like that type.
How do we handle the database itself? Do we seed it with a few fixtures, or would you like us to do that dynamically?
Give me 1 second here. I need to remember what that proper type was. Driver.db.
Okay. That I've used before. So.
My system seems really slow for some reason. I wonder if I have something running in the background.
It just started doing right now because I can see your video encoding also jittering.
Yeah. Okay.
Check if you have LinkedIn open. LinkedIn is a common issue.
Just closing some tabs here, including LinkedIn.
Don't close the stream.
Yeah, don't close this. Don't close this one. The amount of times it happens. I get back or something.
Sure. All right. So now let's do some setup. So the way I've been doing this, let's do this here.
So I just want us to create a document that has the ID foo, that has an attachment foo.txt, and I don't care what else is in there. But I just want us to get the correct status. And then we'll write a separate test to make sure the details of the file are correct. You're copy pasting a lot. Is this all a contract test? I'm thinking if you're copying, can we use that code rather than copying it? Would you deduplicate afterwards?
We could.
So this is SQLite, right? This is not Kivik
Well,
code. This is SQLite code.
This is using Kivik here.
This is using Kivik.
Yeah.
So put needs to be implemented.
So put is
SQL.
implemented, yes, but that's right. It doesn't need to be implemented.
Oof, I don't feel comfortable with that.
You don't like that?
No. Like we're testing the library. If the library has to be implemented, it has the library. I mean, is the library split in like a high level and low level? Does that make sense? Like is puts in some way more abstract, more fundamental than attachment?
It's more fundamental in a sense, but maybe not a meaningful one. So let me see how I did that here with put, because some of the early tests definitely talk directly to SQLite.
So it's very likely that the implementation code we'll create for SQLite is actually what we'll use for the setup, if that makes sense. Because we're integration testing with the actual database, right? Because that's what we're actually implementing. For us, SQLite is not a detail.
It's not a what? It's not a detail.
It's not a detail, yeah.
It's the core. Yeah.
It's the core, yeah.
Okay, so here's an example of using SQLite.
Yeah, the SQL, the statement is a detail, right? So I can decide to format the query differently, but it shouldn't fail for that reason.
Right.
Right.
So if we want to use SQL directly in these tests, which I think makes sense, you have a valid point there. I mean, I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to copy and paste this everywhere. And in some of these cases, so for example, when I create an attachment, I need to update 3 tables.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to copy and paste, 3 inserts everywhere. So, I mean, naturally, this db.put feels like a really nice shortcut because it does those 3 things for me. It does a heck of a lot of other things for me too.
Let's keep it that way. Let's keep it that way then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want progress. I don't want perfect right now. I just want progress. There will be an issue with this. I just want us to discover.
There's a chicken and egg problem, right?
Yes. We have a circular dependency by using the library we're trying to test for in the setup code. So if it's not implemented correctly, it'll fail for the wrong reason.
Yeah, it is actually an integration test, not a unit test.
It is an integration test, yes. Yeah.
But it should be done as well. So otherwise we don't get the right information back, because otherwise this is the problem with fixtures and mocks, that the mocks are static and your code will progress. So you need to make sure that the fixtures are updated as well, which can be tricky as well. So both are important at the same time.
We'll get to that issue and we'll refactor it. I just want progress. We have a failing test. Does it pass now?
It does not pass now, but the setup should be complete now. So now it's failing because this function is not complete.
Perfect. At least that's what we assume.
That's what we assume.
Yeah. So if it's actually in the database, then I'm assuming if we use the driver to connect to SQLite, and if one of those parameters is a connection to SQLite, it's a file handle. It's not a connection, right? It's a file handle.
Yes.
Then by telling the driver to run a specific query, we should be able to get a Boolean that replaces line 13. Right, so I would like us to do it the other way around, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I would like us to select this true, then hit Command Option V to introduce a variable. I think that's the refactor. Wait, no, sorry, VS Code. Sorry, guilty. Right-click refactor, introduce variable. Oh,
Doesn't
wow.
have that.
Or maybe just type it.
Yeah, just type it.
What do you want to
Yeah,
call
it's
it?
just found.
Is okay.
Yeah. And that's the false case.
Mm-hmm. Defaults to false.
Yeah. So in Go, usually you would have found, so you'd have attachment and error, right? In Go, when you're querying the driver, you'd have two return values. You'd either get the attachment or an error, right?
So that's what this function does. That's not what SQLite is going to be doing, though. It's going to give us. I mean, right now all we care about is found, right? It does the.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that
so
right?
So found is false right now. That's the case. If
Yep.
not found, so I would like us to invert that. If found, put this outside where the panic was. So just keep if found, but flip the panic and flip the if around. And put the panic there. And set the found to false.
I'm sorry?
Set the found to false.
It is false.
Oh, it is false. Okay, run the test.
The default is false. Yeah.
Just run the test. I just want to see the panic. Please. Are you sure it's false? Oh no, if it's found.
It's false.
Because it's not found. Okay, yeah. Now set it to true.
There's your panic.
Okay, now it's failing. For the right reason, right? Because we have not implemented the correct return value. So let's implement the correct return value.
Okay.
So what's the correct return value when it's found?
It would be an attachment of some sort and a nil error.
Okay, run it. It fails. Why?
This is the previous case that's failing now because we hard coded that false.
Perfect.
Or the true.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right. So we have done the dummy implementation to make this test fail.
Mm-hmm.
But because we also have a preceding, if this was our first test, we will be stuck again, right? But because we have a preceding test, we now have a flip-flop.
Yeah.
So in order to make both,
they can play against each other.
Because we have two tests, we're actually forced to integrate the Boolean, which we hard-coded, to actually match the actual implementation.
Right.
Right. So these two tests do not make sense individually. They only make sense. They will only force you to implement the integration case if they are together in the code base. That's why I wanted us to write it this way.
Right.
So now we need, I don't know, what would be driver.exec and then some kind of SQL.
Yeah.
Was Copilot's suggestion reasonable?
Partly reasonable.
Okay.
So that query is wrong. That query is not correct.
But I don't actually want to select an attachment. A 1, I'm happy with a 1.
Yeah, but it gave the wrong table name and everything.
Oh, okay. That part I didn't get. How's the chat doing? Are people agreeing with us? We still have about 40 people.
Yeah, but we have not much response yet. We have one more, which we oversaw, which was Yanis was stating that randomness can be tested by property testing.
I'm not a big fan of property testing. But randomness is, I personally, I test randomness with Monte Carlo simulations. That's my preferred approach. Because then at least you need to know, okay, what is a reasonable N for the simulation to be reasonably accurate? That to me is always going to be more reliable than actually mocking with a property test. Personally. But again, I think, Yanis, if you could tell us the context in which you have found yourself testing randomness, I think that would help us synchronize with your assumptions. If you're still here. But that's a great suggestion.
And Grant stated beforehand, I asked him what he meant with password, and he said that I quickly show them passwords on the attachment. Do you need to handle it? We needed to capture passwords to unencrypt it and then save without password and take password hash, or take password hash them and save to later open them. It is a little bit cracky at the moment. I need to refresh that. Can't
So,
read that.
Jonathan, this is using driver-specific terminology that I'm not familiar with. What's context in this context? What's CTX?
CTX is it's a Go concept of a context. We're using it to propagate cancellation signals.
Okay.
So if the request is canceled before it's completed,
sorry,
we don't have
I
to
know
finish
what it is. I just didn't understand why we're okay. Makes sense.
Yep.
So it's a bag that you're using to dependency inject things that you don't need to know the type of to a collaborator, which in this case is the driver.
Yeah.
Okay. And CTX in this case is the context of the actual request, right? It's a network layer context.
So there may or may not be a network actually involved in this request.
Okay.
I mean,
So,
as it is right
specific.
now, the only thing calling it is our test, right?
Fair. Okay.
Which uses context.background, which does nothing.
Okay.
It's just a placeholder.
Fair. Okay. Can you help me out here? Like, what's select true from table name as attachment, where attachment.id, but I think it should be attachment.document ID, right? Where attachment.document ID and attachment dot. Are you sure?
I think that's right. Let me look at the schema I've created, but I think that's right.
Schema.
Attachments table is right here. So
ID.
ID is the doc ID.
That's the doc ID.
Yeah, we will care about
so
rev and rev ID, but not yet.
Does the attachment have an ID?
It has a file name.
So you can't have two attachments with the same. Okay, fair. Okay, so that should now pass.
All right.
Okay.
Yay, it's passing.
Perfect. Okay.
Let's do a commit.
Again, with these integration types, right? Like it's really important that for the flip-flop scenarios, you end up writing 3 tests. We wrote 3 tests here in case that wasn't obvious. We wrote the naive structure the return value for false, structure the return value for true, and perform the check. We need 2 tests to be forced to perform the check because the branch actually has 3 pieces. There's the if statement, there's the positive path, and the negative path.
I would like to ask you to help the audience a little bit, the why. So we have talked about the tests. You have done a lot in code. Maybe many of the audience don't know Go. So it's a little bit like they don't maybe have problems to follow. So let's quickly go for 1 minute into the why. So TDD is about what and why we are going to do that in that way. So what are the benefits of TDD in that case, in that real project now?
On this project in particular, there's a number of benefits to TDD. I don't know. Where do I start? It gives immediate feedback. That's a nice thing. I mean, I could just hack away on this, get attachments, thinking I'm thinking of all the corner cases, get it to a place where it feels like it might be right, and then start testing it. But that's not a very systematic approach. It's kind of like whack-a-mole because I'm going to find bugs and I'm going to find corner cases I didn't think of. So by doing it with TDD, it's a systematic approach where I can be more or less sure that I've covered meaningful cases. I don't want to say I've covered all cases because I may not have thought of everything, but it does help me think of more cases than I probably would have without it. And that to-do list that we started writing over here is kind of an example of that.
I mean, for me, the important part about a to-do list is that once you have a to-do list, let's say there are like 5 rules that we need to implement for get attachment to work correctly. If there are 5 rules, it's possible those 5 rules can create 20 different permutations or 40 different permutations of test scenarios, because they might be combined differently, right? So when there's 5 rules, I would like us to have 5 tests or maybe 6 tests, but not n factorial amount of tests. I don't want us to have all the combinations of possible tests written, right? So if there's a search place, think of it like a Roomba. When I want, what I ideally want is to use the least amount of movement to vacuum every spot in the room, right? But and that is a minimization problem. Think of it like binary search. I want it to be log n. I don't want to do 2n or 4n or 10n or n squared amount of tests to get to be forced to implement it. So what I'm doing with TDD is I'm doing some sort of mental gymnastics to be forced in a way to think, okay, what is the valid reason for this test to fail? What is the valid reason for this test to pass? And there should be only one answer for each, right? So if the test cannot run, it should panic, like we did in the previous example. If the test cannot be checked, it should panic, but it shouldn't fail. For example, to give you an example, if our driver stops working, or if we delete something in the set function, I should see 10 panics, not 10 failures. Because all the panics shouldn't tell me, hey, something's wrong with the driver. I shouldn't suddenly assume that, hey, I can't deploy because something's not working. At the same way, I would rather test that our get attachment function has multiple responsibilities. I want to honor that. The get attachment functions can return status. It can return an attachment. It cannot return an attachment. When it doesn't return an attachment for a very specific status, the statuses are bound to messages, and sometimes the same status has 2 different messages. And I don't want those to fail for the wrong reason. So when I'm checking for the status, I don't want to check for the attachment. When I'm checking for the attachment, I don't want to check for the status. When I'm checking for the status message, I don't want to check for the status, right? Because I want those to fail independently. So I want the test to tell me, hey, the status was correct, but the message was not. I don't want there to be a composite failure where I have to brain diff, okay, what in the object did not match? Unless that's not an important rule. But in this case, it is an important rule, because somebody will be testing against some kind of corner case of, I will underscore the attachment. I just need if there was an error, like we just demonstrated testing.
It is a little bit the reason why we have the testing pyramid as well, where one test is not telling you if the system is still working. You don't need to test everything with a unit test already. So you need to test the crucial things, and especially when it comes to integration, you have several other tests. So one of those tests will catch the error. So this is actually the idea. But you need to still.
This is still a unit test. I mean, it's still a developer test, right? So it will run in process. It will be isolated. It will be very fast, but it does integrate against the driver, right? So the driver is an unknown for us. When there's something wrong with the driver, the test should panic. They shouldn't fail. We should assume the driver works.
By the driver, you mean the fact that it's
the SQLite
itself.
The SQLite,
itself.
Itself and SQLite,
Janis followed up with testing. Randomness is not so widespread in Rare project I have worked on. I suggested property testing as a way to test data properties.
Yeah, snapshot testing or nullable architecture are also, I think, very much adjacent or equivalent practices. John Gallagher has changed my mind on nullable architecture, where you're basically doing a kind of smoke test. You're snapshot testing against the production environment, and then that data from the production environment then gives you snapshots to test against. That's really cool. It doesn't handle randomness, but it does handle cases in that, with 100 requests, it's reasonable to get at least one of these, at least one of those, and then the developer can tag them. Human intervention is still necessary, but at least it makes the test more plausible. Jonathan, you want to continue?
Yep.
What's next for us? Should we refactor anything here? Like, did we end up writing something weird? Is there an eyesore anywhere?
I'll just comment that I know that this query is very incomplete. Like I could think of
Because
a dozen ways that it will break, but I don't want to fix them yet because
we're not test
I
covering
want to
and
follow
then we might
TDD.
accidentally. Yeah. Okay.
I want to wait until I have a test that proves that it's wrong before, I don't want to jump ahead of myself and
Well, let's test that assumption. Let's write a
implement
test.
fixes that are
Let's
wrong.
write a test for something that can go wrong.
All right. So let's say, so this will fail on one of the cases we mentioned in our to-do list. I can't find the right place to drag here. This will fail in the case of our next one here, a deleted document.
Okay.
So I can.
But I wouldn't use that, right? So I wouldn't want our test to betray that terminology, right? Because we said document exists. That is, to me, that's giving the illusion that we're using SQLite terminology and not
Why?
Civic terminology. Well,
Why?
because if it's deleted, does it exist?
Yes.
That I wouldn't want to expose.
According to CouchDB, it does.
Yeah, so
That's
that
a
I wouldn't want
CouchDB
to.
thing.
It's a
Not a- not
CouchDB
a-
thing.
Yeah.
I would, you know what I would do? I would flip it around the other way. I would say an attachment exists when it was added to CouchDB.
Okay.
And I would rename this case to that. Right, so this case I would rename it exists when it was added to a document. Right, so I would flip it around.
I don't understand what you're suggesting to change.
So our test now says when the document exists and the file exists, we get the valid status. Right, so I would now change this to when the attachment exists, we get the valid status. Or at least in this case, we get no error. And I will add in the parentheses no error, because I think this is very specific to. That would be my positive error, right? Because our test is not wrong. If it's deleted, it still exists, and that's what we're testing right now, right? So we haven't test covered the case of the positive or negative sign. We just test covered that it exists or that it existed at some point.
Okay. All right.
Right. So now I want us to test the positive side first.
1 minute AFK.
Right. So it exists, and it wasn't deleted.
Okay.
Right.
So that's what we have. So you want to add another test that checks for that.
But it won't force us to write any code. So I would need to ask you now, what is the default behavior of when we put, like, how many statuses do we have? Let's start from that perspective. How many statuses?
We have a number of them.
Okay.
So we can have a combination of the document exists, and document is, so the document exists, document does not exist, document is deleted. Those three states can exist.
Okay.
You can also have an attachment that exists or has been deleted. And then we also have the case of conflicts, but I don't think we'll get to that today. We can worry
what does get attachment return?
It returns the.
So how low level is get attachment? Does get attachment communicate existence or?
No, it returns the content. Okay, I see it. It returns the content and metadata about a file attachment on these on the specified leaf revision. Although that gets into a whole other can of worms.
Is it user specific or is it more internal?
I don't. Can you elaborate on that?
What is the terminology? What is the inverse of existing? So if a document doesn't exist, does get attachment return the attachment? Sorry. If the document exists and the attachment exists, but the attachment was deleted, flagged deleted, does get attachment return the attachment?
It will by default return not found.
It will return not found. Okay, so then our test is not correct. Right, so get attachment returns only non-deleted existing documents. So again, we don't keep this test.
Yeah.
Right, because we were not specific enough. Right, so get attachment, it returns a document only when it exists. So I would add
Returns
the
an attachment when the document
So
and the attachment
is-
exists on the specified revision.
That as well. Okay, okay. Okay. But let's go to the testing plan. Do you mind just giving me some headspace with the testing plan in the comments? Because I think that would be more useful for like my mental linguistics. Can you scroll down, please?
Here.
Here. Yeah. So, what should it return when it was deleted?
Not found.
Not found. What should it return when the revision is like something's about the revision you mentioned?
It will probably do not found as well. Let me see what the documentation says.
Okay. So when it was queried for the revision, and that's optional.
So the revision is optional. And if it's not specified, then it defaults to the winning current not deleted leaf revision.
I see. So if there was 10 revisions and only revision 10 was deleted, it shouldn't return revision 9's non-deleted attachment. It should return. It should not return anything because 10 was.
It would return not found. Now, if you specified revision 9, then it might return an attachment.
So,
yes.
So I would here now introduce. Actually, I would not betray our API to the context of the query. I would introduce this, which you just explained to me. So get attachment always returns the state of the latest revision. That is a test that I would write.
Say it again.
Or at least just write the text, because it's not a test, actually. It's a group. Right? So the get attachment returns the latest revision. Always. Right? So all checks are performed only on the latest revision.
It doesn't always return the latest revision, but by default it returns the latest revision. Is that what you mean?
No, actually, that's a good point. It returns the latest revision when no revision is given.
Yeah.
Because we haven't given a revision, right? How do you give a revision inside this function?
That's where you use this options, which actually they're not there.
Which one is that?
So
it's options. So that's the underscore.
It's it's underscore because we're not using it yet, but we will.
We're not using it yet. Okay. So what's the happy path? Why would the happy path pass?
So this is close to the happy path.
Yes.
The only thing we're missing is it actually returning the attachment, and it's not yet. It's just returning this empty thing.
Yeah. So we should describe all the negative paths.
Okay.
Let's do that let's do that in text first. And let's do it from bottom up, if you don't mind. If you don't,
bottom up.
Yeah, I just want to visualize it, if that will help.
Okay.
Do you want to play along? It's going to be fun.
So what do you want me to do?
I promise. It's just give us a few new lines, and I want us to
at the bottom.
Yeah, it's at the bottom, and I want us to type a bulleted list, but I want us to go upwards, and I'm going to go from the back, right? So, get attachment returns the latest non-deleted document. The latest revision of the latest revision of the document, of the attachment. Returns the latest revision. Stop. Full stop. Just remove the of the document because I was babbling. Okay, now above that, I would say returns 404. When the latest revision was deleted. It returns 404 when the document was deleted. Is that a valid case? The document does not exist, let's say. Was deleted, yeah.
Yeah, exist is not exist is more accurate because deleted is
Well,
It could be that
both,
it never was added, right?
yeah, both
Yeah.
are things. They're
So-
distinct things.
Yeah. So get attachment returns 404 when what else? What else did we miss? Has
When the
never
document
existed.
never existed,
Yeah. It returns 404 when the attachment has never existed.
right? The document does exist. And then there's also when the attachment has been deleted. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, but I wouldn't put it here. I would put it a bit lower because now we have a game.
I mean-
so I would like to sort it by specificity. So I think this would be the below 68 would be this case. Wait, what does it mean that the latest revision was deleted versus the attachment was deleted? Is there a difference?
Yes.
There's a difference.
Yeah. You can delete an attachment from a document without deleting the document.
Oh, I see. So the documents are separate still. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Interesting. So the
There's
document has revisions, and then the attachment can be deleted from the document without deleting the file.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Now, what else? Is there more cases?
If we want to go into conflicts, we could come up with more cases. I don't know if you want to bother with that right now.
No, but I'm just curious. Like above line 65, is there like a zero state, or is there something weird going on?
So there's also the case that the database doesn't exist, but
No. I mean
I don't think we
domain
go
specific.
into it.
Domain specific. What
I mean,
it
that
returns
is domain
404.
specific in the sense that it's listed here.
Mhm.
You could have
And
a
we
database
search by
that
file
doesn't
name, right? So we say when the attachment with the file name doesn't exist, right? So we need to be very specific here. I would say no. Actually, we covered that. We covered that.
I would have a question in between. It's
Yeah.
like you've mentioned before that you would, the Roomba example, you would go for binary testing and only
Yeah.
try to what's really necessary. What
Yeah.
you do here is basically the opposite. You list every possible
Exactly,
case.
because I don't want to write them. Right? This is telling me that this scenario has two cases. You see? See what they are? Group the scenarios. There's the return 404 case
Mhm.
and the latest revision case.
Mhm.
Right? So get attachment
Okay.
returns the.
Okay. It's not that simple then.
What else is there?
Because you can have multiple versions of the same attachment, and so you need to fetch the one that is for the specific revision that you're requesting. So let's say that I have revisions 1 through 10,
Yeah.
and I added foo.txt at revision 2,
Mm-hmm.
and then at revision 5 I changed it. Now I'm requesting version 3.
Is the revision document specific or attachment specific?
Document specific.
Uh-huh. So the attachment might exist on revision 4, but not on revision 5. And if I didn't specify revision, then I'm checking the revision 5.
If you
But the
don't
exist
specify the
query-
revision, if you don't specify revision, you always look for the latest one.
Yeah.
Which in that case is going to be the most recent version of the attachment or 404.
Okay. See, I would now split this case, but that's still the same case. I would now split this case. I would say, let's group them. For a document, get attachment, returns the attachment when the attachment is found.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then I would extract that logic out. And I would
So
actually mock it. Right? So I would just change the name of the test because I don't want us to be specific on the test. There are two things we're testing here. The fact that the return value is correct and how the correctness is determined. I would like to separate out those two concepts.
Okay.
Because otherwise we end up doing a lot of tests.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I would say when the attachment is found, return it.
Okay.
Right. So now I would, rather than us having the query inside here. By the way, does the test still pass?
Let's find out.
Because we're refactoring the tests now in order to refactor. Yes, they pass. I will now extract this. Extract this, what we just did. This query. No, the implementation.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would extract this boolean out of this function.
Okay. So you want to like turn this into a function of its own?
Yeah, just extract this out. If you have a refactor method that can, yeah.
Let me make that a method, actually. Okay.
Is there any way that we can inject into the instance of this to make it to force it to return or not return?
I don't think I understand.
Okay, so taking a step back. Let's give it a proper name first.
Yep.
So let's match the name. New method should say, what terminology would be? So it's
Attachment is found or something like that.
yeah. So we actually need to use proper terminology. You had the CouchDB documentation open.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? What word did they use? At plain English.
Specified database document or attachment
was not found. And the 200 case
returns the file attachment associated with the document.
I would say is associated.
Attachment.
Yeah, attachment exists or is associated. I would use one of those two. Which one would you use? Awesome.
I would do the same because associated it is not common, and
Yeah.
other developers will spend too much time trying to
Also
find
harder-
out what association is.
And also, it's harder to pronounce. Attachment associated is
You know what?
is a tongue twister.
I should extract this here.
You'll have less return values to check if you.
I'll have
include
the
it.
same number of return values, but one less input.
Perfect.
Although I need to reduce the number of return values, but I'll do that myself.
Okay. I think this is meaningful, because the conversation is difficult. Why? Because when you said, "Oh, it exists except when," that means our terminology is not clear enough. Right. So when the attachment exists, then we return the attachment, and now we need to define what existence means. Right, so we can now write tests, and we can say the attachment is considered not to exist when it was deleted. The attachment is considered not to exist when a future revision detached it. The attachment is considered not to exist when X and Y and Z. Right, so our rules for not existence are more prominent than our rule for existence. So let's write the positive case first, and then force us to check all the corner cases by adding the negative tests in. I'm not sure if you're following because I see you're refactoring. Sorry for brain dumping.
I don't like the way VS Code does this extract function. It always gives it too many variables.
Yeah, how did it do the extraction? Found should return error. What is should return? What is
it? Always does this. What this frickin'? It always makes this should return thing, which is meaningless.
It is meaningless, yeah. Oh, because we're returning. We had an early return, so it extracted that error case for us.
But it's not smart enough to realize that it always
follows
whether error is null or not.
Yeah. That's a typing problem, actually. I mean, it is, but we can fix that. So it's only bool or error. Okay.
All right, now it should be correct.
I think so. Tests? We have tests for this.
Yeah, tests should be passing. They are passing. I can see here, but we can run them.
I see. Anyway. Yeah, so now we can check the naming of the tests. The naming is what? The naming of the test is when the attachment is found. No, so when the attachment exists, return it. Let's make it match. And now we can go two ways here. We can check the structure of the attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the attachment always has the following metadata, and then you can check the metadata.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's something that we can do right now.
All right. So that's fairly straightforward here.
Is that going to be the same test?
You tell me.
I mean, you are file testing, so it is convenient.
Yeah.
But maybe we can add a second test to force ourselves to sort of refactor the test as well. I would write a second test. So I would like the test that says when the attachment exists, return it to pass if the metadata is not correct. Because I would like to know whether the query failed or whether the metadata has not been passed correctly.
So what do you want then? Like when an attachment is returned, it is valid?
Yeah, yeah. A valid attachment contains the following metadata, and then it contains metadata. Yeah. And here
there was this topic last week about.
I generally wouldn't use the terminology is valid or is not valid because we should describe what that means.
Okay. What do you want to say?
And I would literally say it contains the following metadata and then 3 dots and then the test will tell us what the correct metadata is. Contains metadata and then 3 dots. That is how I would name it.
Like that.
Yeah. Because now you can define in the test what the correct metadata is. Because the metadata is specific to your fixture, so we shouldn't really say what it is, right? Unless it is very relevant. But I think that has more to do with the contract than with the SQLite implementation, right? If the contract says metadata is now 10 fields, then our SQLite implementation doesn't really impact, right? So if we can, maybe there's a agnostic way of implementing it. I don't know. Haven't looked that far into this.
Okay, you have 20 minutes left. You might take a look how you can wrap up or come to an end. Otherwise, we have failed to estimate the scope for the session.
So this particular type isn't easy to compare because it contains a reader. So I need to do some gymnastics to.
But that's fair because we want to do these gymnastics, right? Like this is.
Yeah.
I mean,
it just means I can't test against this type directly.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. Because
let's create a type that has the metadata we care about.
Okay. Let's do that. No, you clicked too early. Your system still lagging? That seemed like a. Okay.
Content type makes sense.
Length, yeah.
I don't know if we care about that for the test purposes, but it's probably useful.
For metadata.
We do want file name.
Yeah, I think file name, content type, revision maybe? The document?
Yeah, that's useful.
Yeah.
That's probably good enough.
Yeah.
At least to start with, we can always modify it.
So you have now added code to the testing helper. So we can write a test.
I have not yet, but I do need to, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's a cool setup. Are XUnit frameworks not popular in Go? Is that what's the...
No, because they're not needed. They would be completely superfluous.
Because the interfaces are duck typed, so you don't need any mocks, you don't need any...
So there are mocking libraries in Go. They're not very idiomatic, and they're frowned upon by many people, myself included. Although even last week I mentioned I did write a mocking library for Kivik, and it's distributed with it, but it's for very specific use cases, right?
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah, I wouldn't use mocks unnecessarily if you don't need to. Okay. So if we want an attachment, if you want metadata.
I'm going to say if it does equal nil, then I'll early return.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll do the next test. And Okay, so I need
I'm just
to,
curious to see the amount of boilerplate necessary to sort of
yeah,
bring our tests to
do
life.
like this. God equals attachment metadata. No, you can't fill it in like that, silly. Maybe this will make it smarter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go. Content
Interesting.
type, length, rev pause. Do we want to check the content as well, or we don't care about that right now?
Let's say no.
Okay.
Let's assume the content is the attachment itself, and it's not metadata. I mean, I would always say that the content is not part of the metadata, right? Like that's why the metadata is meta. Otherwise, it would be the data, right? Am I?
Fair enough.
If I have an image and it has metadata, then I'm assuming the metadata does not contain the image.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm thinking about it from the terms of like, this is on a CDN, I want to do a head request, and I want to get the metadata back. I don't want the content. So I'm assuming metadata is all the fields except the content.
All right. So the test
Okay.
helper is there.
This
Now
is
we
a
need
very
to
quickly
add
implemented
the
helper, by the
expectation.
way. Yeah. So you want the attachment, and we want file name to be this, and content type to be this, and length to be 24. Is it 24?
I don't know. It
If
might
there
be,
are
but yeah.
if there are any more questions regarding the audience, it's basically your big last chance to ask questions to both Dennis or Jonathan regarding the topic TDD. So feel free to do it right now.
Awesome.
I will pass them to them.
Yeah, we still have quite a sizable live audience present. If possible, I would squeeze in a 5-minute quick reverse check on one of those queries. Once we have the positive case in, like, do we need to change this query to get the positive?
Yeah, we totally do, because it doesn't fetch any metadata right now.
Okay, so let's fetch metadata. So select exists doesn't make sense anymore. We need to select what? We need to select all the metadata, right?
Yeah.
Let's add these 4 fields.
File name.
Does the test fail right now?
Yes.
What does it say? Why does it fail?
Fails with this.
Awesome. Okay, let's just go. File name, content type, length, and ref bus. Okay. From S. And that's specific enough. I know we haven't dealt with the revisions, but we can do that later.
Right. I think this will work, except I need to
Rename the
data into
underscore. Yeah, and the underscored fields need to be renamed to the uppercase ones. Unless it does it automatically.
Sorry, which ones?
You have underscored fields for content underscore type.
Oh yeah.
And in our object it is mapped. So that's really what our test should be testing, is whether the format is correct on the fields.
Stupid lag. My goodness.
Yeah, like I saw your cursor jump with your mouse as you were typing. Interesting. So that's attachment. Same thing.
Again.
Yeah.
My goodness. I've never seen it this bad before.
Oh. Something to keep in mind. I mean, you've never streamed with StreamYard before, so maybe it's
right.
StreamYard specific,
I don't know if StreamYard's the problem or what.
Yeah. Is something fighting your camera? Do you have OBS turned on?
No, I don't. I mean,
you can turn off the stream and the sharing of your screen and restart it. So maybe it's the WebRTC protocol, which
maybe.
is
Although we're almost done. I'll just
we're almost done. Let's just suffer through it.
Misery-driven development.
So scan is the helper that allows you to put the return values into an object's properties. So you're remapping the memory space of the object being returned. What does it return? A slice, or does it return an object, an interface, a struct?
What is which return?
The thing prior to scan. What does query row context return?
Oh, it returns a SQL.row.
And that's a struct?
I'm sure it is.
Okay.
Yeah, but it has that scan method on it.
And then in the scan method, you tell it to, by index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4, you put it into this object's.
Yeah.
Okay. Into the structs. Okay.
All right, let's
Awesome.
see if the tests are. It says they're failing, but let's run them ourselves and see why.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we got a panic. That's always fun.
Mm-hmm.
No such column rev pause. I think it's just called rev, actually. Now that I think about it.
That's too much.
Oh no, it's a combination. No, it's called rev. Yeah, that I think. Still failing.
We can check the schema. If you're still wrong, we can check the schema. Let's check the schema.
I'm going to run this on my other terminal. It's a little bit easier, have a little more space. Now it's doc ID. Where did it think doc ID? Oh, it's just called ID.
Oh, that's ChatGPT playing tricks on us.
Yeah. All right, the length was off by 1. That's impressively good.
Good guess. Good guess. Very good guess. Very good guess.
It did put the order wrong here. Want should come first, not got, so that the diffs make more sense.
Yeah. Expected first.
All right. Okay. And now, since I changed that from an exist query to this other one, the previous test failed because the error
previous
type,
test fails because
the error type changed. Because exist never returned a not found error because it's always true or false. Now it does return a not found error, so I need to handle that case.
And yeah,
which I actually want to do up here
because we're already passing the case, so we just need to incorporate the If
so
it's
check
no
for the specific
rows,
error case.
So if it's no rows, we return not found.
Not found, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't need this attachment is nil thing because I know it's
correct. Correct.
So it should be good to go now. Yep. Tests are passing again.
Commit.
Let's make a commit.
Commit. Right, because now we have the baseline for the right reasons, and we have each test failing only for one reason. And now I would add the thing that you mentioned earlier, right? I would start with a positive naive implementation, and now by adding more tests, like the attachment does not exist when A, when B, when C, when D, when E, and then I would add specific tests for all of those 404 scenarios that we highlighted to really test the not exist scenario. But I wouldn't even, I would perhaps here, I would maybe, if you could inject the object that checks against the database, if you could inject that, you could actually replace it with a virtual service. So rather than saying I have an SQL database here and it's structured like this and this, we can tell it what to expect, because you can check existence on the naive on these tests. You can check the existence naively, and then you can only integration tests that functionality which is specific to the function. Right, so the tests
your idea is to take SQLite out of the tests, or at least some of them.
For the first two, because they only test the return value. They only test the structure of the return value, with the exception of the positive case. Right, so the negative case has nothing to do with SQLite. When it's not found, the not found is constrained to that method that we extracted. So when that method returns false, that has a very static return type. It has nothing to do with SQLite.
So this attachment exists, which actually now is misnamed, but that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is misnamed. Yeah.
Now that
so you can separate out
like
one or two of the tests beyond the integration border to make them run faster if you wanted to. But it's a very low win. Like the
already run quite fast.
Yeah, the ROI on it is I wouldn't prioritize it. I would maybe do it at the end if there's time left, but that's something we can do now that was not available to us earlier.
So the entire test suite takes 1 second of user time, 0.59 real time,
I
And
wouldn't optimize
it's
that.
doing several dozen queries against SQLite already. So
Yeah. So I would just acknowledge that opportunity exists, but I wouldn't do
if
it
this was against
unnecessarily.
a network connected database, I would completely agree with. I'd be completely on board
Yeah.
if it was MySQL
Yeah.
or Postgres or something.
Or
I
if
don't-
or because the nature of how it's set up, if there's like some clashing going on, in case you
Yeah.
want to hyper parallelize it, I would want
Mhm.
to isolate as many other tests as possible to not
Right.
actually hit the SQL database.
Right.
Um,
Given that it's an isolated in-memory instance
yeah.
in process,
No,
I'm less
no
concerned.
biggie.
But yes, in principle,
No
I
biggie.
completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So maybe you should wrap up the topic a little bit about what you've done in the last 2 hours for everyone who might join a little late. So what was the goal? How have you implemented this? Where were the problems? Are you happy with your solution? And what would you continue to do if we would have more time?
So, I mean, I will have more time, and I will continue on this. I don't know if Dennis wants to pair with me on it more, but I'll be working on it more.
I need
sure.
to check with the kids because Asya has dancing lessons on Monday. So
don't worry about it right now. But the point is, this is an ongoing project that I will be working on. So, my first thoughts in response to what Adrian just said, I'm pleased with where we got. I like having somebody challenge the way I'm doing it because I kind of get stuck sometimes in my own. I don't want to say rut, but my own way, my own methods, and it's nice to see a different perspective and challenge some assumptions and show me a different way to do things. So I definitely appreciate that. I don't know. What do you think, Dennis?
I really enjoyed this. This was fun. Because you made you managed the discomfort of me not having exact terminology, of not being like a full-time primary Go developer.
And that's one of the really valuable things about this session is having somebody who's not familiar with the code. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just said I have my own way of doing things, and that's true. But also, I'm very familiar with the terminology of CouchDB. I've been working on this project for years. I've been working with CouchDB for years. It's good to have somebody with fresh eyes come in and ask these questions. What are the possible states? It forced me to think about some of these things and to express them in a new way.
Because I thought the positive state will be complex, right? Because that maybe there's a complexity to the structure. But then you told me that actually it's the error cases that are complex, and actually it's the error cases. There are so many different ways of deleting a document or disassociating a document. That's actually what we should be testing. And that was not obvious to me until 1 hour into the exercise. And then once it was obvious to me, it was clear to me that the easy is actually the naive positive case, and the complexity is actually then negating all the things that can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some complexity to the happy path when you start dealing with conflicts, which we've intentionally avoided for today.
Okay.
But just to be clear, you weren't completely wrong in your assumption that the easy case or that the happy path is complex.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm glad with that because I would wager there are complexities involved with how the attachment is structured. That has to do with the function between lines 14 and 23. That doesn't have to do with the existence.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because now we have this message of not found missing only in one place.
Right.
I wouldn't want this error message to be in more than one place.
Got it. Yeah.
Right, because we only have one test for this scenario. We said when it doesn't exist, it says it was not found missing with 404. I don't want multiple tests for that, right? So the tests that test existence, I wouldn't repeat 404 not found, 404 not found, 404 not found, 404 not found. I would maybe group them together and say this is what existence means. Mm-hmm. So I would maybe even extract out the unit of this function and just directly test the true or false. I wouldn't actually test the network level return value on it. Mm-hmm. And maybe just test the internal boundary on it. Because this is internal and I would like it to be cohesive. I actually wouldn't want to test it from the user's perspective too much.
Interesting.
Right? Because the error, the message, and the status is always the same, I would prefer not testing against it. I would actually prefer if there was a switch statement and we could internally return, okay, what was the reason that it doesn't exist? Just, even if it's just for the case of the test. Right, so I would say the attachment exists would be a switch statement of it exists if this, and if it's this case, it doesn't. Like a switch. Like if it's this, it doesn't exist. If it's deassociated, it doesn't exist. But that would require us to have a more complex SQL query. It's possible that the SQL query will be written in such a way that it has a Boolean structure to it. It's like it will return 0 rows if all of those things go wrong, or it will return true. But it's possible that it will return a row, but then the revision ID will not be correct, or we might do it in the where condition, or actually return it and then check it manually. That is then the thing I would want to be structure insensitive.
Right.
Because maybe you would need to have an internal return type.
This select statement will definitely grow. It needs to be more complicated. I mean, right now, so an obvious failure mode right now.
Will you ever need more than one query to perform all the necessary checks?
Probably not for this. I do for some of the methods, but I don't think for this one. For some of the put methods, I do, because there's some complex logic. But for this, I will need some joins. I definitely need some joins. And let me just give a really simple example where this will fail. If I create a document, revision 1 with foo.txt, and then I add document revision 2 that modifies foo.txt, I will get an arbitrary version of foo.txt here. I might get the original version, or I might get
you'll get both, because we're not limiting one.
Well, I will, but which one comes first is the one that I would actually return in this particular case.
That one is deterministic. In the test, it will always be the same one.
Probably, but it's
in SQLite insertion order
according to
SQLite.
As far as the API contract is concerned, it's indeterminate.
It is deterministic, but it is not obvious.
Yeah, and it's probably wrong. It will probably return the first one, and I generally wanted to return the most recent one. So there's a case where I need to do some manual or some specific ordering and joins and so on and so forth.
Yanis is a question I would immediately answer with zombies, right? So that's the 0, 1 many, and then you go into the bees. If you Google zombies TDD, you will get the canonical blog article. It's what we did, right? We did 0, and then we returned 1, and then we had the many exception cases, or in this case, the many 404 cases that are happening, because it is I think what's worth mentioning is that, Jonathan, if you had mentioned to me that this is a sparse situation, right? So our API is such that the user has access to many documents, and the API and the get attachment is one of all of one sparse search, right? So we are actually defining what should not be returned rather than defining what should be returned, because it might be very difficult in one sentence in plain English to define what does it mean to be attached. Well, it's attached when it's not this and not this and not this and not this and not this, right? So it's very technical. It's very hard to explain, because that's what makes it sparse, right? So I would maybe flip it around in the problem space where you might say the zombies approach is, well, you just return it when you find it, and then we don't return it for these special cases. That's how I would approach the many's case, right? So the many's case would be all of those extra exceptional cases when it's actually deleted or some kind of other behavior, or some maybe even corruption. Maybe it was synced, conflicted, or whatever else might happen that might be additional behavior on top of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You guys are still staying, because I need to go now. I have a hard stop for me.
I think I'll go too. I have some other things I need to get done, but I would love to do this again.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, we should do it again.
And I got to learn a little bit of Go. So thank you, Jonathan, for setting this up.
Cool. Well, let's plan to make it happen again in a couple weeks or so. If you're interested in following along on that, stay tuned. We'll post announcements on our mailing lists on LinkedIn, on the bulletin board at the pub, wherever you happen to read about it.
All right.
Thanks everybody for watching. Hope to see you again. I'll be streaming again next week, with or without Dennis, working on this project some more. So if you want to watch some more of that, come back. Hope to see you there. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.